Jar Oil. The company have filling stations across the country, and our rates are relatively cheaper than anyone else across the country. Jar Oil is the biggest producer and distributor of cement in the country with the most competitive prices in the market.
Excellent jam, Wave.
Yo, apply. Yo, luta do dede. Luta mënuloo jël moto nga andil ma xaalis. Hello? Ana lay waxal.
Bisul mu fine.
What?
Bisul mu fine.
Oh, yes!
Wave acts in Gambia. Deposit and withdraw money, pay bills, and buy mobile credit without fees. Transfer money wherever in the country for only 1% fee. At Wave, Bisul mu fine. Wave, your money is yours.
It's Tuesday, the 21st of October 2025, and on West Coast Radio, you're with Coffee Time with me, Peter Gomez. Thanks for joining us. And speaking of joining me now is the Managing Director of the Gambia Ports Authority, Usman Jobarteh. He joins me to quote him, clarify information circulating on social media as we speak about the concession, the relationship between GPA and Albayrak. Us, thanks for coming. So what's going on social media regarding the concession and Albayrak per se?
Well, good morning, Uncle Peter, and good morning to your viewers and listeners, both in the Gambia and abroad. As you rightly mentioned, this information was brought to our attention that some certain information was going out in social media about our relationship with Albayrak, particularly relating to a financing that Albayrak is trying to secure from Zenith Bank. So we're here to clarify and to reassure Gambians that the asset is not put as collateral in any debt financing towards the investment of the port.
Is that the suggestion?
Well, I was not privy to the article, but first and foremost, we just like to acknowledge that the media is within their role. Because as public servants, we are not immune to criticism and scrutiny. Mm-hmm. What happens is that there are safeguards that are put in the concession agreement to, one, ensure that the assets are not encumbered in any debt financing, and two, that the government is not obligated in any loan. So that was the clarification that we sought to put out to Albayrak. Only that the document, well, yes, it's sensitive in a way because it's a letter that I personally signed to remind Albayrak about the provisions in the concession as to what they can and they cannot do. And to the extent that once it's put out in the media, not that it's a secret, but it's a sensitive document. But by and large, we acknowledge the fact that the people that carry the story, they are within their role also, because as I said earlier, we're open to scrutiny.
But what triggered the letter in the first place? Why did you have to write to Albayrak to remind them of what they can and cannot do as part of the concession? Were they in the process of doing that which they are not allowed to do?
Well, I would look at it from a positive angle, in the sense that we're holding our feet to the fire to ensure that they do what they're supposed to do. In the first instance, it was Zenith PLC, not Zenith Bank Gambia, that Albayrak contracted this loan. And we just picked up the information also on social media when actually the loan was signed with their head office in Turkey and the Zenith International, or Zenith PLC they call it. So at some point we were engaged by the local outfit that there's a consent letter that we need to sign off with the corresponding bank, which is Zenith Bank Gambia. So in that, when we reviewed the consent letter, we made some observations and tried to remind Albayrak of the obligations, that principally the assets still remain property of government and the GPA, and that too, government is not obliged in any debt financing, because the way the transaction for the port concession is structured is that the sponsor is the one who's coming with the financing risk, and whatever loan that they secure has to be guaranteed on their own balance sheet and not the assets of the port being taken as collateral or the government being obligated. So by and large, this is what we try to remind Albayrak, to the extent that the consent letter, we declined to sign it because of the reasons that I cited earlier. The two main reasons is that the assets still belong to us.
And you refuse to sign. When people hear that, they would think, well, because Albayrak was trying to put up the port as collateral to access this loan.
Well, the term sheet has a lot more details because these are normal in banking transactions. There's a lot more detail in the term sheet that we had commented on. And principally, these are the two main issues. But before we get to that stage, if these two criteria are met, and then we look at the next stage. But it's not that the sponsor, which is Albayrak, cannot take a loan to finance the investment because they do it on their own balance sheet.
No, they can take a loan.
Yes.
But what they cannot do is to put up the port of Banjul as collateral.
Yes, because the assets do not belong to the SPV.
Yes.
The assets still remain.
And the question is, were they attempting to do this? Well, hence, maybe your letter reminding them that, no, you cannot do this.
Well, certain assets can be put as collateral, but not the fixed assets, because the fixed assets still remain as the property of the GPA. So once those two criteria are met, then we can look at the other elements in the term sheet that the Albayrak has from Zenith Bank. And as I said earlier, there are two ways to approach it. Albayrak is the sponsor of the concession, but there's an SPV, which is Alport Banjul, in which we hold 20% equity, non-financial contribution equity. What that means is in the shareholders agreement, the SPV can borrow, which is Alport, but on the terms and conditions that has to be agreed with the shareholders. And again, the issue would come that there are limitations to what government can be exposed to. And in the financing, there is no exposure for government, no assets are encumbered as far as the GPA is concerned. But what we envisage is once the shareholders look at the financing, which is involving a senior debt, which is also envisaged in the concession agreement, those terms will be discussed. And by and large, there are enough safeguards in the concession agreement to ensure that these red flags will not be crossed over.
At what point were you involved in the negotiations with Zenith? When I say you, I mean GPA.
We were not involved in the negotiations per se. Like I said earlier, we picked up the information that the Albayrak has secured financing. And the financing is for the Banjul investment. Because what has happened is the 19 or 20 million euros that they're committed to invest in Banjul in the rehabilitation, 17.5% of that has to be cash equity contribution from their own resources, which they have mobilized. And we have seen evidence that those monies are started to be lodged in country. And the other part of it is where 10% of the profit that is generated in Banjul investment is put in an escrow account dedicatedly for investment in Sanyang. So those monies are secured. But apart from their cash equity contribution, the funding gap is what they now need to raise through the capital market, thus the loan from Zenith Bank PLC. But again, one thing that is also comforting is that if an international bank is involved in financing a PPP or a private project in a country like the Gambia, what that does also is to increase the credit rating of the country, one, and to show that in the unlikely event of even bankruptcy, government is not exposed because these are loans that are contracted outside. So those are some of the safeguards that we have in the concession.
So that's the silver lining in this issue.
Well, there are challenges, but by and large, we have to just pull ourselves by the bootstraps and ensure that we monitor the concession in the way and manner that will be benefiting.
So you wouldn't back the transaction based on reasons given. What happens to it now?
Well, as I said earlier, there's a SPV that is running the concession, which is Alport. And Alport Banjul...
So Alport can go ahead with this transaction and they would get the backing of the Gambia government?
Well, not the Gambia government per se, but
GPA
the shareholders, GPA as a shareholder can participate in the decision for the SPV to take a loan. But the condition is that the assets will not be encumbered and government and GPA will not be obligated for any debt financing or any loan repayment.
Okay. So since this information leaked, to social media and the letter is all over the place, how has that affected, relations, the dynamics between GPA, which you still had, and Alport Banjul?
Well, I wouldn't say leak for want of a better expression. But as I said earlier, the information is sensitive, but it's not a secret. So to have it say that it is leaked, I would not subscribe to that, because with all intents and purposes, we're in this concession to ensure that the logistics cost of doing business in Gambia is reduced. We improve our competitive advantage. And by and large, we just go with an open mind to ensure that the safeguards that are put in the concession towards the benefit of Gambia government and the Gambian citizens at large. So at some point, it does not affect the relationship as such, because what it does also show is that we are fulfilling our role as a regulator to ensure that the provisions of the concession agreement are being respected.
Let's talk about Sanyang. Since the president laid the foundation stone amid, all the pomp and ceremony, and promised that he himself was going to be the overseer, if you like, of the project. He would be monitoring the progress of work. How much progress has there been in terms of, the development of deep sea port in Sanyang?
Well, we're progressing, albeit with some delay, because naturally government has obligations and the investor also has obligations. So what we're doing is we're trying to fulfill the obligations on the side of government, which is to secure the land areas and do a sublease to the investor, and then secure the inland ports in Kawur and Basse, and also identify an area that would be used for pre-gate, that is along the Bond Road. We have some issues, particularly with that area in Bond Road, because of the resentment from the residents of Tobacco Road, that the more we reclaim into the bond polder, the water containment of the bond polder would be reduced. So
which is right.
Yeah, which is right. That's why we had to stop, and only the area that is already reclaimed is what we intend to utilize. But these are areas that were already envisaged in the concession agreement in terms of defining the area. So 50,000 square meters was mentioned, but now what happens on the ground is the area that is actually reclaimed is about 18,700 thereabouts square meters. So we have to do some amendments in the concession agreement to limit it to the area that is already available. And we are also looking at other options. For example, the sanatorium in Banjul, the Minister of Health is intending to relocate it. So we are in discussions with them to acquire that area, which is about 17,000 square meters. And also there is an area next to the port along the Bond Road, which is apparently used for storage of scrap containers that we intend to convert into a customs bond for some of the trucks that are already loaded to leave the port area, because they kind of cause a bottleneck to the operation. So those are the areas that we want to now do an amendment and vary the scope, as it were, to have these areas now constitute the pre-gate. And for Sanyang, the lease has to be sorted out so that we can sublease to the investor. So those are the obligations that government is now trying to fulfill. So once those things are done, then the investor can now be engaged. But by and large, they have also started work on the ground, because they have been given what lawyers would call representation and warranties, sort of a letter to allow them right of easement to go into the area, Sanyang, and begin to do the investigations in terms of the environmental social impact assessment. They have already signed up a contract with an international ESIA firm, and the obligation on government to also do the resettlement action plan has also started, and we are contracting the Department of Physical Planning to actually do that assignment, because what has happened is the area that is now identified as the onshore activity is less occupied than previously what we had anticipated. So the RAP would not be as difficult as we had anticipated. So those works have started. Albayrak itself, they have started the geotechnical investigation sometime in July, August, but because of the adverse weather conditions, they had to pull out, and one of their equipment is like a floating pontoon that they were using to do the bathymetric surveys and to check all the conditions in the water. The equipment submerged because of some accident, and they had to pull out. But now a new equipment is being deployed. So we're not up to the progress as was anticipated, with some delay, but we're gradually getting there. And we anticipate that by the first quarter of next year, actual physical work will start on the ground in Sanyang.
Last week when I had the Minister of Transport Works and Infrastructure, you came on to make clarifications regarding two issues, events at the seaport, and also a traditional landmark in Banjul, that is the mosque at Halfdai, of which access apparently lately has become an issue. Do you have updates?
Well, yes. They are also, I mean, it's in their place to express concern about public access. But I would always like to remind all stakeholders, that one of the conditions that government took in 1993 then, because of a cabinet decision, to allow the expropriation of those properties in Halfday that are contingent to the port area, is that the mosque must remain. So we're going by that government decision. And looking at our...
No, the mosque is there. The question is
yes,
access.
Yes, I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. If that is a government decision, it has to be respected. And then number two, we have our religious conviction in this country. You're either a Muslim or a Christian, but virtually we're a religious country. And then thirdly, we have socio-cultural realities, particularly people that are residents of Halfday, mostly in the diaspora, and some accomplished Gambians or within country. Anytime they have their social events, they prefer to use the Halfday mosque. So there's a attachment to the mosque for heritage and religious reasons. Yes. So going by that decision, now the issue is to create public access. But if you are familiar with the environment around Halfday, where the mosque is, along the former Brown Street, what we're trying to do is the choice of the Halfday residents is to have the access aligned along Lehman Street, where you can go directly to the mosque. But the way the terminal is now laid out, it will not be convenient in terms of the spatial arrangement to optimize utilization, knowing the equipment that is likely to be used and the stacking pattern. So it's like if you use Lehman, the terminal will be divided into two, which is not optimal. So now the choice we have is to either create one along Hagan Street or through Buckle Street, going through former Brown Street and then to the mosque. But from what we saw on the map, the shortest distance to access the mosque by the public is through Buckle Street and then through Brown Street. Because again, if you go through Hagan, still the terminal, part of the former PWD is also already a terminal, where you have the scanning machine by GRA, and the container terminal is right next to the scanning machine. So it will not be ideal, but we are looking at these two options. And with the involvement of the community, we will shortly come to a decision that all parties will accept. But by and large, what is desired is to have a thoroughfare for public access secluded from the port area, because we don't have to go through any security or port operations to access the mosque. So that decision has been taken and it will be implemented. But I can say at the top of my head that the most feasible option, looking at the layout, would be to use Buckle Street and through former Brown Street, and it will be public access where it will be fenced and the public will have a dedicated access. It's like the mosque will be boxed in within the zone.
Would it be wide enough to accommodate two vehicles, one going in one direction, the other one going in the other direction?
Well, with all honesty, I can say this is where there is a little argument, because according to the designers, what they have in mind is to create a pedestrian walkway, which is not ideal. If the mosque has to be used for public, access has to be created for people.
What happens on Gammo nights?
Yes, and that's our position. No, as I said earlier, even people who have their residents, when they have their social program, they prefer to use the mosque because they are attached to the mosque. So or even physically challenged people having access to the mosque, sometimes they come with vehicles. So definitely that's our position. And I believe that the way we're engaging Albayrak, certain positions by government and the citizens have to be respected, because the concession is here to add value and not to create unnecessary problems or to deprive people, of their comfort, so to speak. But by and large, the decision will be made very soon, and it will get the involvement of the community of Halfday.
I'm resisting looking into my phone, but every time you're on, dock workers keep texting. What's the situation with their plight? They've been complaining since this concession was implemented.
Yes, rightfully so too, because what has happened is an analysis was made of the admin cost to the revenue by Alport, and which GPA rightfully also does all the time. And the standard practice is that where you have admin costs in any business, for example, going beyond 35% is deemed to be financially not very rewarding as a type of business. So the analysis was done by Alport, and truly the cost of the service that is provided, particularly for the most contentious one, which is the container operations, is about $917 per move. Before the SLA, the dock workers were receiving wages that are above what is currently being paid. And this SLA was negotiated with the dock labor company and Alport with the involvement of the GPA. And it came to a figure of $1,155 per container move. Before, dock workers used to be paid in terms of the size of the container. either 20 foot or 40 foot. Meaning that if you handle a 20 foot, 40 foot, sorry, it's twice the rate of a 20 foot. But again, some of these decisions, we just need to enlighten ourselves and educate them that the packaging nature can change. You can have a day when a ship will bring more of 40 foot than 20. The reverse could also happen.
Sure.
So what is ideal is to just agree on a move rate, which we did. But in implementing the decision, they realized that the net earnings, particularly for containers, where somebody was getting, for example, $38,000 after the operation, will now result getting $26,000. So they calculated it to mean 40% reduction in their wages, which actually happened. So now we re-engage Albayrak. But, calculating the cost of the service against the revenue line gives them $917. They are paying $1,155, and dock workers are claiming that to restitute their wages, a figure of $1,617 has to be paid. So we've been engaging. And now we've come to a decision as lately as yesterday to agree on a move rate of $1,400, which will take them back to their previous wages. And then the dock labor company itself would have to now look at how to restructure, because the problems are both ways. And transitions generally are not easy, because this is a brownfield project, and we expect these things to happen. But the level of engagement with the dock workers has been so fruitful that we will come to a decision that will be beneficial to all parties. But like I said, the analysis, when it is done, admin cost, meaning the salaries of the workers that are transferred to Alport, the GPS staff, the dock labor company, all the training costs, the medical insurance, all other welfare benefits are accounted for against the revenue that is generated. And normally these are figures that can be verified. It's in the range of 44% thereabouts. So this is the cost that we are trying now to contain, but not to deprive workers of their earnings. Because by and large, I don't think we have it in our systems or even the labor law for changes to be made for people only to earn less.
I'll read you this text message. Why, oh why, could the Gambia not mobilize these loans to invest in what would be an income-generating transport sector? That is what loans should be used for. Why do we mortgage our futures to outsiders with a profit motive whose shareholders are not Gambian? What does this say about our sovereignty as a nation? We can't just keep doing the same things over and over and expect different results. The loan that Albayrak is negotiating with Zenith, Ports GPA could have negotiated something similar, maybe even smaller, and we wouldn't have had any need for a concession. That seems to be the message I'm getting from the texter. What do you think?
Well, the capital resources is one thing, but that's not the end game in port operations. As I keep reminding viewers and listeners that the landscape has changed. Private sector are more efficient when it comes to managing time and resources, and that has been the evidence. Because the most banal of statements we hear in town is, even from my home, is that these people have not brought any new equipment, the space has not expanded physically. So what has changed to warrant that? It means that you were not doing your job correctly. But I said yes, but at some point we have to admit that this is the expertise that private sector bring in. Apart from the capital resources, they bring the network and the market knowledge. And also they have the network, So it's not like us taking the loan. And the sovereignty bit, I would want to maintain that the assets are not, so it's a right of use that is allowed.
The assets are not mortgaged.
They're not mortgaged.
You're trying to avoid the word.
Well, they're not put for sale. That's the most banal of the statements that we hear, that the port has been sold out. No, the assets still remain on us. That's why there's this letter to Zenith Bank that is out in the media, that we are fulfilling our role to ensure that the fixed assets are safeguarded. It's not to be used as collateral. So that's the difference. And if you look at other models, particularly in Ghana, where the Ghana ports has 30% equity in the MPS, which is the concession operator in Ghana, they have it in their shareholders agreement that the SPV can go to the capital market and take a loan to finance the port investment. But when that happens is Ghana Ports is obliged in that kind of loan. I mean, these things can be fact-checked. The information is out there. But our model is peculiar in the sense that the investor takes all the financing risk. The assets remain under us, and generally we look at the logistics cost of doing business in Gambia, which is the end game, to ensure that there's efficiency in the port. The freight rates of goods are coming to Banjul lower, and then we penetrate the hinterland markets, because that's where really the efficiency of the port will have its advantage, to leverage on the potential to serve South region, regional markets in the southwest regions up to Mali. There's a huge potential to attract cargo, in both ways, imports going to Mali and exports going out of Mali. It's a huge market, and only 10% of that cargo would mean twice our volume in Gambia. So by and large, we just want to reassure our viewers and listeners that the port is not mortgaged, number one. And then two, not that we had not tried to get the loan to finance the investment that is required, but the options that we are looking at, which we have explained in the past, we are looking at the DFIs, which is the traditional financiers. African Development Bank would loan to the government, and then government will on-lend to the port at a premium. And this is the way the 3 series of the port infrastructure development were financed. But now it has come at a stage where government cannot be guaranteeing any loan, as it were. So if it has to be guaranteed on the balance sheet and the asset base of the port, look, the assets are mostly on a book value, about $30 million. So if you have to raise $130 million in the market to finance just the Banjul investment that was done in a bankable feasibility assessment. Remember, these things were tendered in the market. And it's not that we're shying away from our responsibility, but the dynamics go beyond just securing the loan. It goes towards how the infrastructure investment is rolled out, how you get access to market. And Banjul, has a perennial problem in terms of the physical environment. Ships beyond 9.5 meters cannot access the channel. And that channel needs to be dragged to about 12 meters to get ships to...
Will Albayrak do this, Alport?
No, it's an obligation for the Gambia government under the concession. Because remember, they're staying in Banjul only for 6 years. If the first phase in Sanyang completes, Sanyang has a depth of 12 meters. So the activity will move to Sanyang. So that problem will be addressed in a sustainable manner. Because dredging the channel means the initial capital dredging, according to studies, 4.6 million cubic meters of sand needs to be removed at a cost of about 35 million euros, and these were 1997 figures. With inflation, the figure could go easily up to 50 million.
So in 2031, Banjul Port reverts 100% back to GPA. Is that correct?
Yes, it is still property of GPA. The investor is just allowed right of use for which they are paying a fee. So the property still is ours, and what we envisage is if the activity moves to Sanyang, the area that is presently occupied the port is about 23,000.
When you say if the activity moves to Sanyang, you give us
when?
fear. Okay.
When the activity, okay, for want of a better word, when the activity moves to Sanyang, the area would be converted into property development and estate. And this is one of the questions.
That's another area of controversy. Unfortunately, we do not have time to go into. We will probably have to come back here to clarify. So you talked about the management aspect that people are telling you, for instance, that these people have not come with any equipment or whatever, but within a short few months, they've been able to clear all these congestion problems. So that's benefit to the shipping agencies, benefit to Alport, if you like. When will Gambians, stop complaining about the concession because they now start feeling the benefits of the concession arrangement?
Well, what has happened is, since they took over, just to correct the statement that they have not brought in anything, no equipment has been...
Gambian, okay.
Well, yes, maybe up to the level that they have the information. Maybe you cannot deny also people from talking from the level that they have information. Yes. But what we are saying with authority is that they have brought in new equipment in terms of these container handlers and the tractor trailers and smaller equipment forklifts.
Okay.
They've also invested in converting the half-die area into a new terminal, which will be inaugurated very soon. Okay. And they have brought in some IT systems to reorganize the whole arrangements. And the planning is what has borne some positive results in terms of the efficiency of cargo handling. To the extent that once the congestion has been removed from what we experienced in the past, more than 14 days to now, less than a day, ships come and they come straight alongside. The Ministry of Trade has been engaged, and letters have been issued to the shipping lines to inform them that since there's no more congestion in Banjul, the added costs on the freight charges to Banjul should be removed. But this will take time to materialize. So we expect that maybe by the turn of the year, people who are in the shipping business will tend to realize lower freight rates because those surcharges that were placed on containers that are coming to Banjul would be removed. And then the frequency of calls with these shipping lines, mainly Maersk Line, CMA, and MSC, would mean that people shipping containers from UK, for example, they had to wait about 45 days and in China. But now it will be less than 20 days because the more the vessels, call more frequently, it means containers can be delivered into Banjul in a much faster. And happy to announce also that Grimaldi has realized the efficiency gains in Banjul. and they are starting to call by next week, according to the information, to bring this Roro, because usually these Roro vehicles were going to Dakar, and then the cars are transported overland into Banjul. But now, grimly, they have now started to make a direct call to Banjul, I think from next week, from what I saw in the information. Yes. Fantastic. So those are the gains that we expect to realize. And overall, reduce the cost of doing business. That's the end game of this concession.
Usman, thank you very much for your time this morning. Usman Jobarteh, Managing Director of the Gambia Ports Authority.
Jar Oil. The company have filling stations across the country, and our rates are relatively cheaper than anyone else across the country. Jar Oil is the biggest producer and distributor of cement in the country with the most competitive prices in the market.
Excellent jams, Wave.
Yo, apply. Yo, luta do de. Luta mënulo jël moto nga andil ma xaalis. Hello?
Busel mu fine.
What?
Busel mu fine.
Oh, yes!
Wave Accina Gambia. Deposit and withdraw money, pay bills and buy mobile credit without fees. Transfer money wherever in the country for only 1% fee. At Wave. Busel mu fine? Wave. Your money is yours.